Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. The book just was published a few days ago, and it's great to have you here to help me to launch it. I'd like to begin, though, by setting the scene. Some of you are more familiar with this history than others. It's a scene I use actually in the prologue of the book to help set it up, even though the scene comes from the end of or near the end of the story, the Pope's last days. The Pope is found in his office. He's ailing, he's elderly, he's infirm. He begs God to give him a few more days to live. He has something he needs to say and realizes he has very little time left on the earth. For years, the Pope had been in good health, known as the robust mountaineer Pope. He had, as a young priest, climbed many high alpine peaks. He was known as imperious, as demanding, while scholarly and devout. He insisted on knowing every detail of everything going on in the Vatican and making all decisions. But now, every day was a challenge. Every step caused him pain. He was unable to sleep at night. He had terrible varicose veins that throbbed pain through his legs. He had asthma that made breathing difficult. And as he lay awake at night, he was troubled most of all, not so much by his pains, his aches and pains, but by the thought that something had gone terribly wrong. In the daytime, in his office, light would stream in through the three large windows that looked out on St. Peter's Square, but now it was evening, so he sat at his desk with a yellow lamp, light from the lamp on his desk, and worked carefully, writing in his hand, trembling hand, on these sheets of paper. The Pope had summoned all the bishops of Italy. There were over 300 bishops in Italy, to St. Peter's for an occasion that was to take place in about 10 days' time on February 11th. February 11th, 1939, would be the 10th anniversary of the Lateran Accords. Some of you may be familiar with this. This was the historic agreement between the Italian government, in this case between Mussolini and the fascist regime, and the Vatican, which established the Vatican City as a sovereign state and did away with the separation of church and state in Italy and made the Roman Catholic Church, gave it the privileged position as the religion of the land. So this was a big occasion, the 10th anniversary. All the bishops were summoned, and Mussolini's own representatives would be there, the king's son would be there, the world would be watching. It was a speech that the Pope saw as his last opportunity to get out a crucial message, a dramatic message. Achille, just, oops, see if I can, anyone know how to work this? Just, I just see a one button which doesn't seem to do anything. I was just going to show you a couple of images to illustrate this. Yeah, yeah, that's what we're trying to do, but I'm not sure. I don't want to keep you there. This is shows Achille, who'd once been so robust. You get an idea. This is actually in his last 10 days or so of his life, what he looked like. And then if you go to the next image, here you see both as younger men at the time. They both came to power in 1922, which is the beginning of my story. Benito Mussolini is a 39-year-old, a rabble-rouser, a bully, aficionado of violence. He would come to power by leading his kind of ragtag troops in a march on Rome, and through a kind of extortion come to power at the end of 1922, just a few months after the Pope came to power. The dictator came to depend on the Pope and vice versa, and this is the story I tell in my book, even though they seem so radically different. The dictator would depend on the Pope to bring him Catholic support. Of course, Italy was 99% Catholic, although there were certainly anti-clerics there, but for the most part, the population was certainly very much identified with the Catholic Church. Mussolini needed the support of the Pope for a couple of reasons, not just where was the population Catholic, but one of the largest opposition parties that he had to face was the Catholic Party, which had been endorsed by the previous Pope, the Popular Party. In fact, the head of the Popular Party at the time was a priest. So for Mussolini to come to power and then solidify his power, he basically had to end the influence of the Catholic Popular Party, and the best way he could do this would be get the Pope to withdraw the church support for that party and to embrace him. The other thing that the Mussolini was concerned about was winning international legitimacy for what would be his dictatorship. And for this, too, the Pope would play a very important role. Now, though, although the Pope had made this deal beginning in 1922 with Mussolini, he had long begun to have second thoughts, to have real doubts. Mussolini, in recent years, we're now back to the scene on his last days on Earth, as he thought back on the last few years, Mussolini seemed to be thinking he was becoming a god himself. And the other thing that really bothered the Pope about Mussolini was his increasing embrace of Hitler, a man Pope Pius XI despised. As Mussolini, beginning in the mid-30s, grew closer and closer to Hitler, the Pope grew more and more uncomfortable. In May of 1938, Mussolini hosted Hitler in Rome, in Italy, for a triumphal visit. The Pope, disgusted, fled the Vatican, went to his summer retreat in Castel Gandolfo, closed the Vatican museums, refused to light the Vatican, and showing his displeasure, yet he was distraught at the kind of reception that Italy was giving to this man that he saw as the enemy of Christianity, Adolf Hitler. 2 months, and I think I have a shot here of, if you can get to the next slide, of the visit of Hitler. There we are. 2 months after Hitler's visit, which you see portrayed here, the visit in Rome, along with Mussolini and Hitler, you see the King, Victor Emmanuel III. 2 months after was the dramatic and shocking announcement of the new racial policy by Mussolini. It's July 1938, and the Jews in particular of Italy were shocked to hear that the official position of the government was that there was a pure Italian race to which the Jews of Italy, who of course had been there from before the time of Jesus, were not part. The Pope was very upset. He was particularly upset because this seemed to show the increasing closeness of the fascist Italian dictator with the Nazi leader. People around the Pope, as he was becoming distraught, and this is an important part of my book, become worried because they actually are very pleased by the deal that has been made between the Vatican and the fascist regime, pleased by all the benefits that the church has gotten from Mussolini, and worried that the Pope in his old age, lashing out, might damage those relations. At his headquarters on the other side of the Tiber River, only a couple of kilometers from the Pope, Mussolini raged against the Pope. Mussolini himself was a rabid anti-cleric background, and yet he had made this deal with the Pope because he saw it in his interest, in the interest of the fascist dictatorship. But he had no personal sympathy for churches or for clerics. He would tell people at this time, how dare the Pope express criticism of me, look at all I have done for the Pope. If he said to one of his people of his staff, but also to his lover, he had a young lover at the time I'll come back to, he said, if Italians still go to Mass in large numbers, it's because I tell them to. Yeah. If priests aren't being forced to drink castor oil, if churches are not being burned down, it's because